Thank you for flying with us. It's good to have your company. There's an irresistible magic and energy to May, with one foot in spring and both hands grasping summer. Beechwoods radiating viridescent light, canopied by the bright chorus of birdsong. It's the month when the landscape becomes increasingly lush with verdant vibrancy, and in our gardens, courtyards and balconies, the froth of blossom and dance of colourful blooms are all the more beautiful for the soft backdrop of luxuriant leafage. Of course, nothing's entirely perfect, and many a leaf bears the scars of pestilent teeth. But the holes and the hole makers are all part of a healthy garden ecosystem. Welcome to our small garden in Kent, southeast England, hardiness zone 8. We are situated on poor draining clay, but have spent over 20 years digging in compost to improve growing conditions. And having moved here with planters from our former courtyard garden, we, or more accurately I, have not lessened my love of container gardening, mainly because in a small space it allows you to bring the best flowering blooms to the fore. Even in that pause before most of the summer annuals open, just a few height-boosting bricks used to elevate a small bowl of flowers can give the space a more generous feel. Our flowering containers have undergone quite the rotation since our April video, as narcissi and tulips fade and fall, and alliums and poppies are now growing tall. Our tender perennials have now escaped the confines of the pop-up overwintering tents, and these have been dismantled, cleaned and packed away in the loft for next year. The tents, not the perennials. We always look at the collection of agapanthus and salvia and wonder just how will we fit them all in on the patio, but with some considered shuffling around of pots, they do all find their space. The garden table which we use for the spring flower theatre has been moved into the position the tents previously occupied, which is the warmest, most sheltered place on the patio, allowing us to sit and soak in the whole garden, which is 100 square metres. Our Shirley poppies seem very late blooming this year, and I am missing their vibrant presence amongst the more subtle palette, but their buds are burgeoning promisingly. I don't sit for long because there's usually something catching my eye for closer inspection, like watching the gorgeous little holly blue butterfly laying her eggs around the flower buds and berries on the tree. Or a little job I suddenly have the urge to complete, but I won't be using the shears to shape the holly until all the emergent hungry green caterpillars have metamorphosized into winged things of beauty and flown away in late summer. Forthcoming Things. Coming up, I reflect on what wasn't right and what gave delight in our April planting. This month's highlight flower is our new gorgeously intense violet blue salvia called Viola Klose. I undertake plant division to restore vigour to favourite summer and autumn blooming perennials. I'll show you how I enhance overlooked elements of the garden to elevate their appeal into centre stage sweetness. And we have a top tier tip on maximising the use of space in the garden so that you can get usefulness, pleasure and beauty from your water butt or rain barrel. Let's apple pea fern see what the garden is all about. At the start of last month, I was swooning over peachy pink tulip apricot pride, imagining how the colouring would harmonise with our favourite perennial flowering cultivars, the warm sunset shades of Princess Irene and the exquisite amethyst glow of tulip Blue Aimable, which of the three is still flowering into mid-May. This is how I intended Apricot Pride to subtly blend and balance the trio, but the tall and generous-sized flowers quickly bleached to pale ethereality, seeming to sit uneasily amongst the group rather than creating harmony, as their formerly warm honey tones became more icy and cool. So it didn't seem to work. What do you think? Nonetheless, Apricot Pride is a thing of beauty and did provide a pleasing visual echo of our pale and pretty apple blossom on the other side of the patio, which has been a particularly joyful sight this year on a tree that bore no blooms and almost lost its struggle to survive when exceptionally wet weather left its roots waterlogged last spring. Beneath the apple tree, our newly planted container of Nemesia Whistly Vanilla also echoes the blossom vibe of Apricot Pride and continues to release gorgeous sensory clouds of fragrance on warm days. It's not immediately obvious, but there are several periwinkle plants hidden in the undergrowth. This is Vinca minor Ralph Sugared, which is beginning to spill its tendrils artfully over the container rim. Continuing the apple blossom theme, these petals were falling on the last day of April over the tabletop spring flower display and a little Saxifrage cultivar called Apple Blossom that we introduced at the start of March. It is a diminutive treasure that has given much pleasure, and all these weeks later it is slowing but still flowering. I have moved the little pots into the Cretan urn in the centre of the lavender rondel to appreciate them in a different context. I find this saxifrage adorably sweet and pretty, tucked into the evergreen silvery foliage of our convolvulus neorum, the silver dollar bush, which is now recovering from winter dieback and beginning to thrive again. We enjoy its pleasingly simple white funnel flowers. There's a Cosmos Apollo pink already in bloom. Our dwarf bearded iris is Frosted Angel, which succumbed to disease and disappeared a couple of years ago, but made an unexpected return last year. Its slug-nibbled foliage adds scruffy reality to the otherwise pristine petals, which are gloriously bright in sunlight and charmingly otherworldly at night. I love experiencing the torchlit atmosphere, scents and sounds of the garden when the moon rises high. But for a daylight waking dream, especially if you're a lover of blue blooms, gorgeous bearded iris Mer Du Sud with completely dreamy petals of lapis lazuli washed with violet iridescence in the low evening light. This is our repeat attempt at growing her, only this time in the ground rather than a container, and a playful cat almost dug her out of the bed the day after planting back in March. but we hope this will prove to be her perennial happy place second time around. And here's another beautifully intense coloured bloom. Salvia Viola Klose. We're so very glad that we chose her. We are so enjoying the exceptionally saturated colour of our two new salvia plants, Viola Klose, with their dynamic flower spikes surrounded by whorls of intensely violet blue hooded blooms, which look particularly dramatic against zesty lime green foliage plants. We have the second salvia positioned in a softly harmonious sandwich between the blue-grey leaves of eucalyptus and the rich plummy tones of cotinus. This salvia flowers profusely from late spring or early summer, potentially into autumn if fading flower spikes are removed to encourage new production. We are growing ours in relatively small pots, so we may size up as the season progresses, depending on performance. This cultivar is a hybrid of two European species, Salvia nemorosa, the woodland sage, crossed with Salvia pratensis, the meadow sage. Viola Klose enjoys full sun to light dappled shade, moderately fertile, moist, well-drained soil, is drought tolerant once established, is a true pollinator pleaser, a highly beneficial nectar source for bees and butterflies, has a mature height and spread to 0.5 metre or 1.6 feet, and is fully UK hardy, USDA zones 4 to 8. This salvia will die back and disappear in winter. In spring, the wrinkled, softly hairy rosette of leaves will reappear, when it also appreciates a mulch of compost or manure. I have read that it is easy and obliging to divide in spring if desired, and perennial division is the next topic to share. I'm going to divide 4 of our container-crowded perennial Hesperantha. This will stimulate new growth and recharge blooming vigour to maximise our autumn flower pleasure. This is Pink Princess, also sold under the name Wilfred H. Bryant. We love the way low, late-season sunlight illuminates the pristine petals with ethereal beauty. Their deceptively fragile appearance belies a storm-proof resilience. They can flower through to Christmas in a mild December in our Zone 8 garden, even through brief nighttime freezes. Pink Princess is a sun lover, prefers moist, free-draining soil, grows up to 1 metre or 40 inches high and half as wide, is autumn blooming, has semi-evergreen leaves, and is UK hardy H4 or USDA zones 8B to 9A. Hesperantha are also an excellent source of pollen and nectar for foraging autumn insects. first I tried to shake out the gravel mulch, expecting a torrent of stone, but it is actually quite compacted. The top dressing of gravel helps retain moisture. After watering, the root ball slid out rather more speedily than I was anticipating. But it's a toughie, and after dislodging more gravel, which I will rinse and reuse because aggregates are so expensive here, I then turn my attention to the plant. This root ball comprises dozens of individual plants, each one growing from a rhizome between 5 to 15 centimetres under the soil, sending up the narrow sword-like leaves, which hint at its membership of the Iridaceae family, like irises. Rather than separating each plant individually, I am just going to take a small clump of rhizomes, about 1/6 of the overall volume, and repot them in a central cluster with room to expand. A baby like this probably won't produce flowers until the following year. You can see that over time gravel has washed down into the soil, a clue to the 8 years or so that this particular plant has been growing in the same container. It is generally recommended to divide Hesperantha from mid to late spring every 2 to 3 years. I'm going to transplant this clump into a long tom clay pot filled with fantastic rich compost. I'm trying a bit of an experiment. So to explain, around the spring flower theatre on the garden table, there are upturned long toms serving as stands to elevate other plant pots. This particular pot has a circle of foil inside with a few small drainage holes, with the aim of retaining the upended contents within the pot whilst maintaining a nice moist environment, encouraging earthworms. This peat-free general-purpose compost was the growing medium for a cosmos plant last summer, and I just cut the flower stalk right back in autumn and left its large root ball and compost intact and placed the retaining foil on the surface, then flipped the pot over. Well, now, single-handedly while filming, I'm going to attempt to flip the pot back up and we can look at the contents. First, I'm gradually lifting the pot millimetre by millimetre across a piece of card while simultaneously kicking the card beneath the pot with 1 foot, just as a precaution against spillage when I try to turn the pot the right way up. This endeavour isn't entirely effective, as you can see. Soil and foil have fallen out. But look at those worms. That is a promising indicator that the old depleted compost has been replenished with nutrients from worm fertiliser. I'm popping the phone down on the table for a moment to try a two-handed approach to the pot flipping task. The footage is capturing a bird of prey, the red kite, effortlessly riding a thermal, in contrast to my undignified struggles below. It ends up a bit of a mess, and the pot is on its side at this stage, but these pink garden pals have been busy recycling the old cosmos root system into nourishment for the next plant occupant of the pot. So it's a win. I'm going to transplant my clump of Hesperantha into the pot, having set aside a portion of worm compost to help revitalise the other containers. I'm adding a little horticultural gritty sand because I've noticed how well Hesperantha perform in enriched loamy soil, and I'm gently mixing that in with a little store-bought peat-free compost to top up the pot. But honestly, this is not a fussy princess. She will please you in any well-draining garden soil or compost, as long as there's some moisture. I just felt like pampering her. I like a full plant appearance, but decided against adding smaller sections around the edge, otherwise I will probably need to divide again very soon. And here's a lovely clump for a friend who gardens on chalk, so her plan is to dig lots of organic material into the bed to retain moisture. I thought I was hearing honeybees buzz around while filming, but I realise they are just happy humming hoverflies. Here's the clump potted up and ready for a gravel top dressing, the foliage looking fresher already. I fish out leaves and twigs from the gravel before washing. I'll be using tap water because our rainwater butts are empty. We've been experiencing exceptionally dry weather. I'm rinsing above a bamboo container, not only to clean the aggregate, but because our gravel is full of seeds from summer annuals, and anything that germinates is unlikely to compete with bamboo giants, but might affect moisture availability for Hesperantha. Here is the divided and top-dressed quartet of pink princess pots. I'll group them by other plants that welcome moist soil, such as ranunculus, which will remind me to water them all in dry spells. Back in March, I divided our pretty Aster Mönch with visions of double the dreamy blue flower impact this summer. The more substantial portion of the separated sections was planted at the back of the new lavender bed, where it is progressing promisingly. The other smaller portion was returned to the container, a deep long-tom-style clay pot filled with free-draining peat-free compost and placed in a sunny patio spot, where it is also thriving. Splitting the aster, it's a bit like splitting the atom, creating new energy, charging each divided plant to perform with greater vigour. I've just repeated the process with our container-grown long-flowering perennial geranium, Rozanne, which is a really attractive and useful plant in borders or pots. When placed amongst container-grown summer annuals, it weaves its charming violet-blue flowers through surrounding specimens, uniting the whole scheme and blurring the boundaries of individual planters. I split Rozanne into thirds using a lawn edger to cut through the tough roots. Here's the portion to be replanted in the pot, lying on its side. We can already see the knobbly cinnamon brown crown with the little red fuses emerging, readying to shoot out leafy stems with the electric force of new spring life. It's best to ensure the crown is planted just below the surface unless leaves have already emerged, and in which case keep the crown exposed with the rest of the roots beneath ground and dress with a mulch before leaves emerge the following spring. In each little semicircular bed, either side of the bench at the bottom of the garden, there is now a new geranium clump settling in. Rozanne is fully UK hardy, USDA zones 5 to 7, and thrives in full sun to semi-shade. She was discovered by keen gardeners, the late Donald and Rozanne Waterer, who recognised her beauty and potential. These two small beds had a terribly disappointing start to the year, as very few of the beautiful narcissi, leucojum and snake's head fritillaries made an appearance, and those that did emerge were quickly consumed by slugs and snails. So we hope Rozanne thrives here and scrambles up through the overhanging hydrangeas in the summer, adding violet blue splashes to the vibrant pink and providing plenty of blooms for the bees. I wanted to show you this cute little composition because while there is such eye-catching attractiveness in big, perfect blooms, sometimes the overlooked elements in the garden can prove just as enchanting. Our tulips, Blue Aimable, are reliably perennial in pots, but they do also produce bulblets with miniature blooms. These baby plants are utterly overshadowed by their larger counterparts in the garden display. But by picking them and arranging them in appropriately small-sized vases indoors, they suddenly have a special diminutive charm all of their own. To create a balance of tension and flow, I've tied some tulip leaves in loose knots and allowed others to extend. I've added snake's head fritillary seed heads, having scattered the ripened seeds in the garden, adding in the last few blooms from dead-headed wallflower spikes, and I've harvested the receptacles of fallen tulip petals that have a rather underwater appearance, as if an exotic fish could come swimming out of them at any moment. Elements I might otherwise overlook in the garden after flowering take on an ornamental purpose and elegance in their own right. The meagre, inconsequential bulblet flowers strike a pose with new confidence. Small is beautiful, and beauty is everywhere. Water is a limited and precious resource, and harvesting it can reduce our home's carbon footprint and lower water bills when on a meter. We use 2 water butts, and the largest has a 500-litre capacity, which takes up a sizable chunk of space on the patio. By adding an outdoor weatherproof tabletop over the butt, we have created purpose for an otherwise dead area of space. We mainly use ours as a practical platform for growing seedlings or cuttings, but equally you could cover your table with glorious ornamentals for a soft and pretty feel, especially suited to trailing plants. Any durable tabletop would work, but the lighter the better, because once a year you will probably want to remove it to clean the tank interior. Also, so as not to overload the barrel with weight, predominantly lighter plastic containers are more suitable than covering the entire surface in weighty clay pots. So I'll explain what we currently have on our tabletop. A soft pink Chinastoma with a hot pink Phlox subulata. These are window dressing to make the table look prettier. Some oriental poppy seedlings. This is Patty's plum. We're waiting to see what this becomes, but it looks like a hellebore seedling to me. There are some isotoma beginning to establish. Then in this largest plastic container we have a self-seeded Cicericium and wild poppies that popped up under an opium poppy sown in autumn with seed from a friend's garden. We've never grown Papaver somniferus before. I hope it likes containers. There's some larkspur called Misty Lavender to transplant into a flower bed, Nemesia Melody Blue ready for a bigger container, some trimmings from our buddleia that I just stuck in the dirt, and of course in true buddleia fashion they obligingly rooted straight away. This is an inexpert cutting from an acacia called Wally's Wattle. To be completely honest, I'm not sure if it's actually rooting or is just a stick. So there you have it, our top tier tip for creating additional space for plant containers by placing a tabletop over your water butt. While we adapted the top of the butt to suit our needs for more space, nature adapted the bottom to green up the place. Campanulus seeds blew in on the wind, germinating and sending their roots through paving cracks beneath the base, where it is cooler and damper, while plants above ground bring frogs to hunt for slugs and snails under the dense mat, which means no gastropods climbing up the sides to nibble through our seedlings and young plants on the tabletop. This froggy was rather camera shy, unlike his companions in the pond. Many areas of the garden are softened and sweetened by self-seeded plants like the Campanula portenschlagiana and uplifting orange Welsh poppies, which all descend from one plant from my aunt's garden. We describe them as delightful incidentals because they are not the main ornamental attraction in the garden or part of the original planting plan, but the bees adore them. To the pollinators, they are very much a main attraction. There's nothing incidental about them. When the poppy flowers close for business in late afternoon, the determined bumblebees will still force their way in and out. It feels as though nature is continually teaching us what's important in the garden. And there's still so much to learn. Thank you all for joining us on our May garden tour, and until next time, we wish you all flowerful times and nature-soothed minds.